2020 film The Invisible Man. The story is a modern-day retelling of H.G. Wells' classic sci-fi novel of the same name. The opening scene of the film introduces us to Cecilia, who wakes up in the middle of the night in her luxury condo. She sneaks around as she prepares to leave the house without waking up her boyfriend Adrian, the antagonist of the story. Cecilia drugged Adrian, so she keeps a sharp eye on him through her phone, which is linked to cameras dotted around the home. As she makes her way outside, their dog comes running out. Cecilia removes the dog's shock collar, but the dog bumps against the car, causing the alarm to go off. Adrian starts to wake, so Cecilia frantically starts running away from the condo. She manages to escape and meets her sister Emily, who is waiting outside to pick her up. Adrian catches up to them and smashes the car window before the sisters speed off into the night. He finds the bottle of diazepam Cecilia used and had accidentally dropped on the floor. 2 weeks later, and Cecilia is now staying at her friend Detective James Lanier's house. Despite seeking refuge, Cecilia is still terrified of her abusive ex-boyfriend Adrian and refuses to go outside. Emily visits her, but Cecilia is afraid that Adrian would have followed Emily to get her location. Emily reveals that Adrian had committed suicide, but her nightmare has only just begun. Cecilia is shocked and tells James and Emily about how he was abusing her. She reveals that Adrian wanted a baby, but she secretly took birth control pills because she didn't want a reason to be tied to Adrian. Cecilia and Emily meet with Adrian's brother Tom, who is a lawyer. He tells Cecilia that she has inherited a $5 million fortune, but she must meet certain criteria to access the funds. She needs to prove that she is mentally competent, and she mustn't commit any crimes. With this news, she repays James for letting her stay by opening a college tuition fund in his daughter's name. During the night, Cecilia senses that someone is in the room watching her. She walks outside into the cold night and we see someone's breath next to her. We cut to the morning and Cecilia is making breakfast. As she's concentrating on cooking, the knife is pushed from the counter and falls on the floor. The stove is suddenly turned up, causing a small fire. However, there is no one else in the kitchen. Later that evening, Cecilia is in bed sleeping next to James's daughter, Sydney. The force from earlier starts to gradually pull the sheets down and starts to take photos of them. Cecilia is awoken and tries to pull the covers back when she sees what appear to be footprints walk over the bedsheets. Terrified, she calls for James, but neither he nor Sydney see anyone else in the room. We see Cecilia at a job interview, and as she is presenting her portfolio, she is shocked that it has been emptied. She has a panic attack and faints. She wakes up in a hospital and is told that there are high traces of diazepam in her system. To her horror, she finds the same bottle that she dropped at the beginning of the film, with Adrian's bloody fingerprints on it. Cecilia and James meet with Tom and she presents her findings to him. It seems that Adrian is making do on his promise to find her wherever she goes. He must have found a way to appear invisible since he is a world leader in optics. Tom dispels this theory and points to the urn with Adrian's ashes and the photos of Adrian's dead body at the scene. Later, Cecilia visits Emily, who is angry when she sees Cecilia. The cause for Emily's anger is an email that was sent from Cecilia's account. Cecilia pleads that she didn't send it, but Emily doesn't believe her. When Cecilia returns home, she checks her computer to find that someone has written a horrible email, stating that she didn't wish to see Emily again. Also, that she wishes Emily was dead instead of Adrian. Sydney hears Cecilia crying and comes in to console her, but the invisible force hits Sydney. Sydney believes that it was Cecilia who struck her. Furious, James comes in and takes Sydney away. After they both leave the house, Cecilia tries to coerce Adrian out from his invisible veil. She pours coffee grounds on the floor, hoping to see footprints tread through them. She calls Adrian's phone, only to hear the ringing coming from the attic. When she investigates the attic, she finds the phone with the word "surprise" and her papers that were missing from earlier. Sensing that the invisible man is watching her, she throws a bucket of paint covering the invisible man. As she goes downstairs, she sees the kitchen sink running, with the remnants of paint that have been cleaned off. She picks up a knife, but the invisible man grabs her and chokes her. Cecilia is tossed across the kitchen, but she fights back and luckily escapes the house. She travels to Adrian's house and finds a suit that can refract light to turn invisible. As she tries to escape with the suit, she encounters the invisible man, but she manages to escape to the car. Cecilia meets Emily at a restaurant, and as she's revealing what she discovered, a knife starts floating in front of them. The knife slashes Emily's throat, killing her. The invisible man then puts the murder weapon in Cecilia's hand. The police arrive and place Cecilia under arrest. She's detained in a psych ward and pleads her innocence, screaming as she's strapped down and sedated. Then a presence in the room says, "Surprise." Cecilia is interrogated by the police but is fearful that Adrian is in the room with her as she explains. It's revealed that Cecilia is pregnant. Tom visits her in the psych ward to make a deal with her. Either she can split the inheritance with Tom or she can go back to Adrian with the baby. Tom knows that Adrian is alive and that he swapped out the birth control pills Cecilia was taking. Cecilia, angry and distraught, pushes Tom's things off the table. She manages to grab a pen and some sticky material while Tom is picking up his things. A few days later, Cecilia bides her time and waits for a window of opportunity to escape while it rains outside. In the shower room, she uses the pen she stole from Tom to start to cut her wrists. Knowing that the invisible man will intervene to save his unborn child, she stabs him with the pen. His suit begins to malfunction. Hearing the commotion, a guard enters and the invisible man tases him. More guards appear and the invisible man violently kills them. Cecilia starts to make her escape, picking up a gun on the way. She heads outside and a game of cat and mouse begins as she weaves through the cars in the parking lot. The invisible man catches up to her and threatens to kill Sydney. She manages to escape in a car and tries to call James to warn him of the danger. She arrives at James's house and so does the invisible man. As he attacks Sydney, James tries to intervene but is brutally beaten by the invisible man. Cecilia uses the spray from a fire extinguisher to cover the invisible man in foam and then shoots him with the gun she picked up earlier. Cecilia takes off the invisible man's mask to reveal that it's Tom she has killed. As this is happening, a SWAT team enters Adrian's house to find that he is alive and that Tom had kidnapped him. The police believe that it was Tom who orchestrated everything, but Cecilia knows that this was Adrian's plan all along. Cecilia contacts Adrian to meet with him. She goes to Adrian's house to have dinner, but James, who survived the beating, is waiting outside. He has a listening device ready to catch Adrian when he reveals the truth. She sits down with her tormentor in view of the security camera. Cecilia and Adrian start talking, and she says she won't have the baby. Adrian tries to plead with her to reconsider. She excuses herself to the bathroom, and while she's gone, a knife starts to hover in front of Adrian. It slashes his throat and kills him. Cecilia reappears and screams at the sight of his body. James sees the aftermath of the murder and sees the invisibility suit in Cecilia's bag. He chooses not to say anything, even though he knows that she killed Adrian. The angle of the security camera makes the murder look like a suicide. Cecilia leaves with the dog, free from the shackles of Adrian once and for all.